we're going to do. Here we go. Hello, and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another episode of our phone-in show. I can't start as if I'd not done that. I'm going to edit out that first chunk of the show. So apologies for the audio issues. I looked down, a microphone was just 3 red dots, which clearly meant there was something wrong with the microphone. So that's good that we've sorted that out. So thank you so much, everyone that's tuned in. Really appreciate everybody doing so. As I've mentioned, this is a phone-in show. We're going to be talking about all things Arsenal, and we're going to be talking about Ivan Toney in today's show, with Arsenal specifically being linked to a lot of strikers. We are going to be discussing the Brentford forward that has been linked with the club. There's been suggestions over the last week about the potential types of deals that we might see. We're going to address that and some more. But mainly, this, of course, is a bit of a show in which you guys can jump on and tell me how you're feeling about him as a forward to be linked with. Now, I do kind of want to hear from people that do disagree with me, but I do still want to, get a broad range of opinions in the show. And I think the best way to do that is to kind of set out the stall from my side of things, first of all, so you can then come into the conversation as best prepared as you can. I also did an article which does a lot to kind of explain the wider context of what I think and why I think what I do regarding Ivan Toney and the situation with Arsenal centre forwards, and why I think that if we're going to upgrade, for me, Ivan Toney's not the one that I'd personally go for. The article, I think, has been misconstrued by a lot of people, for starters. You think that it was a whole thing about trying to say why we should be keeping Eddie because he's apparently better than Toney. No, that was not what the article was designed to do. And that is, if you read through the entire thing, you'll be able to see the reasons behind that. I'll leave a link to that down below. Or, of course, it is on my Twitter as well, at Tom Cantor Media, which you can see down just below me there. So we're going to have people on. If you would like to get involved with today's phone-in show, there are, of course, some rules that we need to follow when it comes to the phone-in. The first rule is, of course, you need to be over the age of 18 to get involved. The second rule is that you need to have a webcam. You need to be on camera if you would like to come onto the show, because it's the only way I can really check to the best of my ability if you are indeed over that over 18s bracket. So what happens is when you jump into the StreamYard, you come up along the bottom of the screen and I can see people that aren't yet in the show, so I know whether or not they have their camera on. There is also a little private chat in StreamYard which lets you to leave notifications and messages to let me know when you're here. So please do that. The link to join is in today's video description. It might ask you to sign in. You're going to need to have a Google account to do that. So just sign in via Google and or whatever else you need to log in with, and you'll be able to join us. I think the best way to, though, so I can see a couple of people below now who don't have cameras on. If you want to get on the show, you need to turn your camera on. Otherwise, you won't get in. It's as simple as that. I think the best way to start is probably to start speaking about that article that I did write. You can find it on the football.london websites. Let's just share my screen so it's easier to see. Okay, so here we go. As I said, we're not going to go through the whole thing because you can read it, as I say, online. So looking down, for me, the stats are the key thing. The stats are the key thing as to why I think what I think regarding Toney. So I'll run through a couple of them now, and then we'll get our first caller in on the show. So I think the key thing is talking about the non-penalty goals. For me, Ivan Toney scored 20-odd goals last season. 6 of those were penalties, of course. And I prefer to look at those stats in a non-penalty analysis, because penalties are penalties. You take them, you score them. Great, you can score penalties, but they're not the measure of a striker. They're a measure of any player's ability to score penalties. And we don't really get too many of those anyway. And when you look at the amount of non-penalty goals per 90 that he's got from last season, when you look at the that he had 0.42. That was his non-penalty goals in the league per 90. Per start. So every time he started. And Nketiah's this season, 0.44, slightly better. And I think this is where the crux of the argument begins. Is Toney enough of an upgrade on what we've got to be worth the investment? Let's bring in our first caller to the conversation from SF Gooners. How you doing, mate? You good? You well? Just take yourself off mute, and I'll be able to hear you, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to hear what you're saying. There we go. How you doing? Yes.
I'm great, man. So, I read your article. I think it was great. I'm actually from Florida too. I'm a big fan. So I appreciate you getting me on. I think the article was really good. Where I disagree is, I first don't think that we need a world-class elite striker to win the league. I think we need somebody that will score goals, will add goals. But for instance, I'll preface City in 2021, I think it was. when they won the league, I don't think they had a 20 goal scorer at all. I think it was KDB that was the leading goal scorer that year. He had about 15 goals. And Mahrez had some goals. Gundogan played up top for a bit. Foden, I think, as well. So I'm of the impression that, if we get like a Victor Ocean or something like that, it's really just based on that. If we can't provide a service for a poacher, it's almost a waste of money. I think Ivan is a guy that can link up very well. I think stylistically, he helps the team more than Eddie, because Eddie's a little bit limited as a poacher. So when we have to go into possession, kind of like
just quickly, I'm just quick because I'm just jumping in because the audio's a little bit because of the wind you're outside. If you've got earphones or anything like that to plug in,
I do. I do.
Plug the earphones in, and it will be much better. I'll let you sort that out, and then I'll bring you back into the conversation. Okay. Once we sort out the audio, we'll be back with that. Raf says, I can jump on, but we'll need the link. You can have the link. The link is in the chat, Raf. You can see it at the top of the chat. It's right there. If you see the little blue tab at the top of the chat, it should come up with the link. So I'll throw it into the chat box again for you guys. Give me a second. I'll just do that once more. So you guys have got the link. There you go. And then we'll bring in our guest back as well. Hopefully, when the audio has been sorted out. Going into the chat box just to get some of your comments while we sort this out. John says some of the stats are a bit better than Jesus, but FBref comparing Toney with Jesus on a per 90 basis. Toney passing is only 59.5% completed, whereas Nketiah 80.4, Jesus 80.3. There is little doubt that obviously Toney's biggest strength is his goal scoring. He's finishing his goal scoring, what he does inside the 16-yard area. That is the biggest strength, the biggest plus that you get from Ivan Toney. The question mark is whether it suits Arsenal. And I don't think that it necessarily works in the same way for Arsenal. I think a lot of people that are saying that we would be transformed with Toney coming to the side. I don't think he starts over Jesus. Like, we can have a conversation about him and where he ranks and, alongside Nketiah. But he doesn't start over Jesus. Like, if you look at the number of goals and assists contributed by Jesus per 90, it's significantly better than Toney. And I think I actually include that in the article as well, talking about specifically so if you look at the non-penalty goals and assists per 90 last season, Jesus had 0.7 last season. Toney had 0.55. It's also worth remembering that Jesus missed a third of the season because of that injury. And despite missing a third of the season, he still had more assists than Toney, 6 compared to 5. So that's also worth bringing into the conversation as well. Chaz says, I'd prefer us to get in 2 squad players so that we're covered in midfield and the defence. I know people are frustrated with the striker situation, but I don't think we actually need Toney. And I think that is certainly true. I think that not needing Toney and this kind of obsession around the need to go and get a better striker than Jesus leads us to think, well, is anyone better than Jesus if we just try and change things? The shiny new toy syndrome that we sometimes get, if that makes sense. We're going to bring our next caller into the conversation once we've sorted out SF Gooner's audio. Hopefully what we can do is we can bring in our next caller the conversation. If you are down below and waiting, please make sure your camera is facing you. Otherwise, I can't bring you into the conversation. Of course, do leave your names in the description and the private chat as well. While we wait for that, Amira says, stylistically, Toney is more similar to Eddie than Jesus. We all know Arteta doesn't have a plan B, just A1, A2. Eddie's still learning to adapt. Are we expecting Toney to adapt? We have Havertz as well. And I think Havertz is someone that's forgotten in the conversation. Let's bring in James to the conversation. James, how you doing?
How you doing, Tom? You all right?
Yeah, not bad, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you, bud.
You're joining the restless bunch. Whenever they come on the show, it's like, I'm going to start sitting up now. It's the same behaviour every time I see it.
I didn't think I was going to make it on, if I'm honest.
That's right, mate. It's right. It's a little bit quiet. I imagine being 3:30 here in the UK, most people are still probably working, but I got a busy evening. But I appreciate you jumping on. What do you want to tell us?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, wow, I personally probably would like to sign Toney.
Yeah, go tell me why.
It's not necessarily that I like him so much. It's more that, like, I don't know. I feel like the football we're playing now, the style is just all about getting to the final third, dominating possession, and then we just love crossing the ball, whether it's high or low. I just feel like I don't want him maybe in the 11. I just want him in the squad. I want him as an option. I feel like he would just suit our system amazingly.
Do you think there's a cut-off point in regards to kind of his price that would make it not worth the investment? Basically, how high are you willing to go to buy him?
I mean, I've been suffering a long time, so me, I don't really mind with the price. 60,
Yeah.
70 is about fair, I'd say.
Mm.
I've heard we might be able to sneak some sort of loan, possibly, and
Yeah, I'm glad you've brought that up because I don't know where that's come from.
yeah,
My understanding is Arsenal's intention at the moment, like all this deal is that it's a loan sorry, the David Raya situation is that it's a loan for him. And what I think people forget is David Raya being on loan means we can't bring another Brentford player in on loan. The rules mean you can't have two players on loan from the same club in the
Uh,
Premier League. So there is, I think maybe whoever reported that story maybe either forgot that rule existed or is assuming that we're going to make that deal for Raya permanent and then allow us to do the Tone deal. But that wouldn't make too much sense because the reason why we brought Raya in on loan with the option was to comply with financial fair play. So
yeah, so it could be like, well, potentially, we might have the money to pay off Raya, but not have the money to buy Tony in January. Potentially, it depends who we sell because really, we haven't got anyone to sell. Like, it's
and Ketia, I guess, because if we're moving in a
yeah,
striker, it would be him. Yeah.
it is a shame because I do love Eddie. I always love like the real players, who come from the academy or whatnot. But the proof's in the pudding. What you said yesterday, off the bench, he doesn't score, and he's not going to start. So it's
Yeah.
just, what's the point? You might as well just
Mm.
bring in someone. If not Tony, then it has to be someone. We need someone.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that it's not that I don't want us to sign a striker because I think Eddie's amazing. I think Eddie's a decent centre forward, but I think he's better suited to starting for, ironically, probably a Brentford. Further down the line and starting week in week out for them. I'm not convinced that Tony's the guy. I also think the age profile as well doesn't necessarily suit us. 28. I'm not sure that's a right fit for us. And I think going for a younger striker that's maybe got some of the characteristics of Tony, maybe more, and yet has a higher ceiling than what Tony has, is probably maybe a better investment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm sort of stuck at the minute because it's like we're right at the top of the Prem. What to do?
Really?
No one really knows. Like it's all, the younger striker could work out, Tony could work out. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm at that point now where I've had enough of Eddie. He doesn't like playing Reece, which, is a shame. Very good. So it's like I just want someone who's going to play the same sort of minutes as everyone else, if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Definitely
Yeah,
makes sense.
in because the rest haven't been like Eddie and Reece aren't his signings, even though he's put them to contracts. The proof's in the pudding with Reece, so he won't even give him any minutes. It's very frustrating, but it is what it is.
When would you play Reece when he's not? Like, are there any times where you thought, why is he not bringing him on now?
A lot of times, I like me, I like a bit of rotation. The thing with starting Saka all the time is like he's just going to be like used to starting too. You got to keep him a little bit on his toes, and also just rest him too because he's so unbelievably good. And Reece has proven to be like in the game against PSV. I know it was next to not much meaning behind it, but him and the other guy, the other winger, Bakayoko, were clear on the pitch.
Patterson, yeah.
Yeah, they were both like clear, just absolutely looking very well. Was it Bakayoko? The one who
Bakayoko for PSV was on one side, Vitesse was on the other side. Yeah.
That Bakayoko guy, he was mustard. But you could see that, he's got skills, but Reece is always playing with the fringe players. And it's just like
give him a chance.
Yeah, what do you expect? But that's just sort of my opinion.
The irony is when he came in with the first team was when Saka got injured last season against Nottingham Forest at home. He came in and scored 2 goals, and he's not been given a chance really since then to play. So anyway, I feel like we're going to be going off on a tangent about Nelson, which I wanted to do because I think it's an important point and actually comes quite nicely in his combo. But
I sort of the only sort of reason I'm on that is just because I've sort of had enough of Troy out there. Nothing against too much. But yeah, I like my wingers a bit more, like a Martin Saka. Go on them, whereas I feel like Trossey's a false 9, which also just makes it all a little bit more
No, I completely agree with you. I think Trossard's best role is centrally. I think that as a left winger, he's good maybe coming off the bench in certain situations where like we have got them penned into their own box and you want a bit of technicality on the edge. But like a Villa, when we brought off Martinelli, that game was perfect for a fast winger to run in behind, and Trossard's just not that. So
Yeah, he was killing me sadly.
I was sitting there in the stadium thinking, my goodness me, that sub has really killed things for us. James, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Really appreciate you jumping on, mate.
Cheers, Tom. Catch up soon, bud.
Pleasure. Speak soon, bud.
Bye.
Much appreciate James coming on. Fantastic stuff. We're going to bring on our next. I'm actually excited to bring on our next listener because I reckon this guy has been incredibly frustrated with me pronouncing his name wrong over and over again in the chat box, and he's finally going to tell me how I pronounce it. How you doing, mate? You good, Joel?
I'm good. How are you, Tom?
Tell me, how do I pronounce it correctly?
It's like uh-oh with a D, so da-oh.
Da-oh. Okay.
That's it.
Nice. Brilliant. Okay, now I know for future. That's brilliant. Okay, cool. Da-oh, tell me what your thoughts are on the conversation.
I, at this point, am anti-Toney.
Okay.
And I don't know, I've just been like watching how we play with just different center forwards. I just see us thriving when like either Trossard plays up top or Jesus plays up top because they're creators as well as goal scorers. And when Eddie plays up there, I feel like we're missing a piece that we don't have when Trossard or Jesus plays up there. And so for the striker that I think that we need to sign, if we want someone who is a goal scorer, I feel like they also have to be a creator as well, which I know is asking a lot.
Well,
but
we've got one. So it's clearly possible.
And the one thing though that with Jesus is when we give him the ball in the box, I feel like sometimes his initial thought isn't always to go for goal. And that's the opposite with Eddie. You see, anytime Eddie gets the ball, he's like, I'm gonna shoot. And sometimes it's when he's not squaring the ball to Saka when we could have probably scored a better chance, but he always is looking for goal. And sometimes I feel like we miss that with Jesus. So if we can find a striker in the market, which I don't think we can in January, who can be that creative option like Jesus is, but also has an eye for goal like Eddie, I think that's who we can sign. But I just can't think of one at the moment. That's why I'm anti-Toney.
Why do you think there is so many people that are I mean, I read this here from Hugh. Hugh says Toney is one of the best options for striker and we should do everything to go and get him. Why do you think there is such kind of a pining from so many people to get him?
I think it's because he has that eye for goal. He on Brentford now that, I mean, outside of Mbeumo, he's the goal scorer. He's the guy that bags goals for them. And I think we kind of long for that, especially after seeing Haaland score like loads of goals last year. I think like we want that on our team, but I just don't know if we need that. Like Saka's putting up double-digit numbers in both goals and assists. Martinelli's putting up 15. Odegaard's putting up 15. And Jesus put up, I think it was like just shy of 10, and he was injured for 3 months, So
yeah,
I just don't know if we need that to win the league. I think that we do need a striker that has a better eye for goal, but I don't think they need to be the sole outlet up top.
Yeah, I do tend to agree. I think there's something a little bit too one-dimensional about Toney in regards to his style. I know a lot of people say that, he's got the ability to bring others into play because he's a bit of a target man and things like that. But as people have pointed out in the chat, I think us signing Kai Havertz has given us a target man option anyway. You think about the goals he scored, the goal he, in my opinion, should have been allowed to stand if I was to rule football and what a handball is and isn't at Aston Villa. Kai Havertz popping up in that moment, in that position, cross into the box, scores. His goal against Sevilla, right place, right time from to receive the ball from Jesus to then hit it past the goalkeeper. And then, of course, the Brentford goal, I think, is the most target man archetypal goal where the ball was played to the back post and he's there to head it in at the back post. So do we need someone like that already if we've got Havertz in the squad?
Honestly, I mean, I don't think so. When we have the ball, I mean, all our players are forward except for Saliba, Gabriel, and maybe Ben White. So, I mean, if we play someone at the left 8 like Havertz, they're going to be in the box ready to receive a ball. And that's like majority of the time when we do have the ball and when we're in scoring position. So I don't think we need someone. I think that our bigger focus is on the wing in the midfield and solidifying our defense with another fullback, maybe a right back, or a right-sided center back for Saliba. But I think strikers, like, we're pretty good there. We have Trossard, Jesus, Havertz can play up there. I mean, Martinelli can probably even play up there. I don't know. I just don't think it's a priority for us.
No, I think that there are other priorities. I think midfield, defense still have got, I think, a really fast winger, as me and James were just talking about a second ago, are absolutely, for me, positions that should be up there first. But, thank you, first of all, so much for telling me how to pronounce your name correctly. And thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. Massive thank you to Dao. I really appreciate that as well. And let's hope we are going to try and get SF Gooners back on the show. He's having some issues trying to sort out the headphones. If you are waiting down below, please make sure if you'd like to come on that your camera is on and facing you. Otherwise, I can't bring you into the phone-in show. So make sure that your camera is on. You'd think it'd be easy. Olawale says, I think we need him if we need goals like 20 minutes to go. We can bring him on, and I think he'll be a better option than Eddie. No disrespect, though, to Eddie. And I think that it's important, that last line. There's often so much talk about these new strikers. Eddie has done a decent job. He's just, for me, when we're looking at what Arsenal need to do to go to the next level, to go to the top, is he really going to be that guy? Is he really going to be that next guy? Our next caller is Kasim. Kasim, if you get your camera on so I can see you, and I can bring you into the call. Otherwise, I can't. So Kasim's refusing at the moment, it seems to do that. So we'll keep going through some of these comments. Mr. Thuggy says, two things can be true at once. Toney is better than Eddie, but it doesn't necessarily mean he is good enough to be where we want to be. And I think someone left a reply to one of my tweets earlier on today as well, which was something along the lines of, I think that, not that Eddie is statistically showing really good. If you had the option to start one of Eddie or Toney for Arsenal in a Champions League final tomorrow, who would you pick? And I think the answer is Toney. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'd start Eddie over Toney in that final. And then I'm asking myself the question, well, if the answer is that, if the answer is that we're in a position where Eddie's giving us better numbers and he's giving us, a return from his XG and from his shots on goal that is apparently, according to what we've read and what we are being told and what the data we're being given is, if it's better than what Toney's is, why do I still feel like I want Toney in that situation, in a big game moment, like a Champions League final? And I think the answer actually comes down to experience and the length of time. And we've seen more of Toney from playing in the Premier League, starting for a Premier League side. And I think that we know more about that. Whereas with Eddie, it's different. With Eddie, we've seen him come into some games and do well. We've seen him come into some games and not do so well. I think his goals against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge get overlooked. I think his goals against Manchester United last season have been overlooked as well. But yeah, it's really, really difficult. Kasim has sadly left us. I was going to bring him onto the call, but it seems that coming onto camera was too much of a problem. I did see Raf as well earlier on, waiting to come on, and he's disappeared. It seems like everyone's like, I'm not going to get on. You will get on. If you ring into the show, I promise that you will get onto the show if you've got a camera and a quiet place to record and good microphone as well. Because people message me saying, Tom, I was waiting, I jumped in, but then you picked another caller, so I left. And I was like, well, you're probably next in line. So if you jump in and just a little bit patient, you will get into the call. If you just need to go to the link that is in the chat box and you can get on the show. I am very well aware that doing this at 4 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon is not prime time to get people into the show. So I'm very well aware of that. But it was the only time I could do this. So I was just trying to get as much and much covered as we could. Nai says here, and signing Toney in January will sort out cover for Saka as well. Jesus can play on the right to a very good standard. Again, I don't know how we're going to sign Ivan Toney in January. I don't know where the idea of spending 80 million quid on a striker, because I think it's going to take that amount of money. We're looking at figures being talked about up to 80 million pounds to bring in Ivan Toney. I don't know how Arsenal are going to sign Ivan Toney for 80 million pounds in January. I really, really don't have it. Raf says he's going to be with us in 10. Raf, I will hold you to that, my friend. Paul says Toney's off-field antics are also something that should be factoring into our thinking as well. So the betting thing doesn't come into my way of thinking about this at all. He served his ban. He will be back in January. I don't even think about that when it comes to the decision to or to not buy Toney. the thing that does come into my thinking was obviously some of the videos that we've seen of him being quite disrespectful towards Brentford. I'm not a big fan of that. However, when I talk about Toney, and I want to make this very clear, whenever I analyze Toney or I look at him as a footballer, when I talk about him in the case of whether or not we should sign him, for me, it does not factor into this conversation, and I'm purely looking at it from the footballing standpoint. Let's bring in Hugh to the conversation. How you doing, Hugh? You good, Joel?
Thanks for being here. Can you hear me well? I have my
I
headphones
can hear
on.
you perfectly fine. It's always the best thing when someone calls in. I can hear them clearly and crisply. So thank you for that. That wasn't a dig at any of our previous callers, by the way. It's just
It's no
when you're on
problem,
a podcast, you're like, audio is like, I can hear Danny from a Burkout Wonderland screaming at times when the audio is not great. But Hugh,
Yeah.
tell me, because I know you've left a comment and I appreciate you jumping on as well.
Yeah.
You said that you really want Toney. So tell me your reasons why you disagree with what I've been going on about.
Well, for me, Toney is. I'm thinking for me like strikers available, and obviously I would say Osimhen, I would say Rafael Leao, as a winger, another option, and Toney is like the three main strikers I'm looking at as something that can really bring us to another situation. And I don't really see us getting Osimhen or Leao, especially with those kind of price tags. So Toney to me is an option that can, force us to be better while not really replacing Jesus. And for me, even getting Toney, I'm not against getting another striker on top of that. So for me, Toney's not the be-all, end-all of all the players we can get. It's more just right now, we need another option. I personally am not a big fan of Eddie Nketiah. I think he has done well for us at the time, but I would sincerely go all out for Toney, even more than a midfielder. Even though I feel like we kind of need both, is that Toney to me brings us up that level or closer to the level of Man City than a midfielder does.
Does he start over Jesus for you then?
See, that's the thing. I'm not 100% sure if he does. I think it's more an option of like.
Sure, do you know what I'm saying? Because I absolutely agree with you, by the way, when you say about getting close to Man City. That is what Arsenal need to do. Arsenal need to make signings so in the best way possible they can get close to Man City. If we're signing someone and they're not better than the starting option, how does that get us closer to Man City?
That's a good point. I feel like he is similar level to Jesus, but it's not clear to actually better. So in that option, it would be more of like horses for courses, where certain games Jesus is better, certain games that I feel like bigger games where we're playing against like a Man City, we would play a Toney because we're gonna have less possession, so you hold the ball up more. While when we play against low blocks, Jesus is great to drop in deeper. So that's what I'm kind of leaning towards. And for me, it's less of an issue that I don't think Jesus is a guy, and more the issue that I don't think Eddie Nketiah is a guy. I think Toney is a replacement for Eddie Nketiah, and as just another striker that's on the similar level. So we're not like a huge drop off because in certain areas, like with Saka, we're not a huge cut. It's not a drop off in a way. Whereas with the left wing position with Trossard Martinelli, I feel like either one could start, and I'm kind of fine. I don't feel the same way with Jesus and Eddie Nketiah.
It's interesting, the whole Nketiah Toney thing, and like the reason why I'm like not as keen on Toney as I am others is because of the numbers, that I see when I do the research on it. And I know you said that you're not Nketiah's biggest fan, which is fine, and that Toney takes us further. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the article or whatever, anything like that. It's fine if you haven't, because I can read you the stats. But have you been surprised that Nketiah beats Toney in a lot of these areas?
Yeah, I would really assume that. For me, I do see the improvement in Eddie Nketiah. Like I know, like when he would try to get his contract, that's when I was very much against him playing. 'Cause I did not see the striker that I see. I definitely feel like now he's way more improved. He's better finishing in the box. He definitely suits our system better than when he was before. I also think that improvement over time has really close the gap between him and Jesus. I feel like he's gotten better himself, but his improvement still is a farther reach. But I do feel like his stats do show that he's a more clinical striker than Jesus, and when given opportunities, he can score crucial goals. It's just that he needs to start more to
Just
do that.
quickly, Hugh, I'm only stopping you because there's some breaking news. I'm really sorry to be rude, but there's some breaking news, which is very interesting indeed. Let me read this to you. So, an independent regulatory commission has found the charge against Mikel Arteta for an alleged breach of FA Rule E3.1 to be not proven. The manager was charged following various comments in the media interviews after Arsenal's Premier League game against Newcastle on Saturday, the 4th of November. It was alleged that his comments constituted misconduct in that they were insulting towards match officials and or detrimental to the game and or brought the game into disrepute. The Regulatory Commission came to its decision following a hearing, and the full written reasons for this can be found below, which we will be having a look into. Hugh, you're with us live to discuss this. Arteta not charged in the end. So all of us thinking, how many games is he going to miss? He's not been
exactly.
charged. So what do you think about
that? Shocked. To be honest, definitely shocked. Yeah. I'm not shocked of what Arteta said. I do agree at times that we try to focus too much on the referees, but that decision was pretty egregious. But I would assume that they would have made an example of him. Obviously, like being like in America, there's like athlete Draymond Green that done like a lot of like egregious things, and in a lot of American sports they make an example out of players or coaches that cross the line. So I felt like the FA would have done similar thing to Arteta, also being a manager of a top club. So the fact that they didn't charge him is pretty surprising. But yeah, I'm kind of shocked. I thought he would at least gotten Liverpool banned for me personally.
It's really interesting. I'm just, while you're talking, trying to scan through the article that they've left out. So, introduction and background. It says the match was obviously Arsenal against Newcastle. Going into the match, Arsenal was undefeated in the Premier League and was sitting second in the league, 2 points behind the then leaders Spurs. Newcastle was sitting in sixth. Newcastle had developed a reputation for being a difficult away fixture for clubs visiting St James's Park. Mikel Arteta expected the match to be a close and hard-fought contest. Arteta's expectations proved to be well-founded. The first half of the match was scoreless and featured a number of strong challenges, two of which the Premier League's independent assessment panel subsequently concluded ought to have been punished with red cards. That was the Havertz challenge, and that was Bruno Guimaraes' forearm smash, I think it was. I think that they were the two, unless I'm getting that wrong. I think they were the two that was discussed. The second of those challenges, which occurred shortly before half-time, was by an Arsenal player on a Newcastle player. That was the Havertz one, which prompted a fierce reaction from a number of Newcastle players, three of whom were shown yellow cards by the match referee, and heightened the tension and hostility towards Arsenal as the visiting team in the stadium. In the 63rd minute, Newcastle scored what proved to be the only and so decisive goal of the match. Before the goal was confirmed by the video assistant referee, reviewed three individual incidents which had occurred in the build-up to the goal. First, whether the goal had been allowed to go out of play. Second, whether Newcastle's cross had fouled Gabriel. That was Joel Linton, and the push that we all know was definitely a push. And the third, whether the goal scorer had been offside, Gordon, in that incident. The VAR review took more than 4 minutes. Mikel Arteta was, by his own admission, highly emotional about the goal being awarded. He considered that there had been at least 2 infringements in the run-up to the goal, the first and the second one. He believed that the VAR had been wrong not to overturn the relevant on-field decisions, and that VAR had thus been wrong to allow the goal to stand. He also considered that the lengthy delay in conducting a VAR review was unacceptable. Arteta remained in that emotional state following the match. Indeed, his frustrations at Arsenal having lost the match and having lost in what he considered to be a highly controversial circumstances was heightened when immediately following the match. Review of the video footage reinforced his belief that the goal should have not been allowed to stand in light of either the both or the first and second incidents, and he was told by certain Arsenal players that Willock, a former Arsenal player, had expressed the view that the ball had gone out of play before he crossed into the penalty area. That's very interesting. So Joe Willock actually apparently said that he felt to other Arsenal players that the ball had gone out of play. Very interesting indeed. Hugh, you're going to have to listen to me talk a little bit more. I'm sorry. Those matters increase what Mikel Arteta described as his sense of injustice and frustration that the goal had been allowed to stand. The on-field decisions and the VAR decisions in relation to each incident were subsequently reviewed by the Premier League's IAP. That's the people that basically said that there should have been red cards, etc., etc. They said the on-field decision in respect to the first incident had been correct, so that the blade decided that there wasn't enough evidence to suggest it had gone out of play. The on-field decision in respect to the second incident had also been correct, and that was obviously the foul, and that they said that the third incident had been correct in the sense that there wasn't enough evidence to suggest that Gordon was offside. Mikel Arteta's opinions about the incidents and whether the goal should have been disallowed, while plainly genuine and strongly held, were thus not ones in which the Premier League's IAP agreed. So it seems, just from reading this, and there is a lot more, but I'm not going to bore you. You can go and read it on the FA's website if you would like to. But there was frustration from Arteta. There was the context of the game, and they have seemingly felt that the charge has not been, they've basically found him not guilty of it because of the context surrounding the game. Hugh, I want to, before you go, just give me some of your thoughts listening back to all of that. A lot of words there, but what you think about it.
Well, it's great to see that they kind of corrected their own mistake after the fact, which is okay. But for me, it just shows a level of I hope this is great and all. Now saying that they made a mistake and they're not going to charge them for it, they won't really mean much if this continues more often than not. And so when we go to a place like Liverpool and similar things happen, or we play home games and similar things happen, it to me it just kind of covering our own ass essentially, where they just find a way to be like, we messed up basically, and we're not going to punish you for our own mess up, our own mistake, but we also not gonna really gonna change too much what we're doing weekly refereeing. It's just more of we won't get scrutinized or we won't try to punish you for something that we did on our own. So it's great that they acknowledge their mistake, but if it's continuing, it's kind of like saying sorry and then continuing to do the same thing over and over again. How sorry can you actually be?
Hugh, thank you for jumping on with me. First of all, for basically what we're going to do is in the summer, when we're waiting for some transfer news, you're going to come in on a phone-in show, and we will have announced that we've signed another striker, because clearly you're a bearer of good news. So,
Hey, hopefully. I always want is just another great player coming in Arsenal, and I've been a fan since like 2013, so it's 10 years, and I'm dying to see us win a trophy, major one. I've seen FA Cups, but I definitely need that league title. So I can.
Hopefully we do, mate. Hugh, really appreciate your time, my friend.
No problem. Have a good one, man.
Have a good one, mate. See you later. Much appreciated, Hugh. What a nice person for being so patient while I read through that. Just to give you another bit of context, actually, from this letter, this is really interesting. I'm going to have to do, obviously, I'll be talking more about this in tomorrow morning's 8 a.m. show, because this is a show that is going to be going back to talking about Toney very, very shortly. It's just because this was a very breaking story as we were live. The letter concluded with the following summary. Mikel Arteta was expressing the genuine frustration felt by him and his players following a tense, highly pressurised fixture that contained several contentious decisions. These incidents were the latest in a growing number which Mikel Arteta has witnessed in Arsenal's matches and other matches across the Premier League, despite the efforts by him and other parties to help raise the standards of officiating. Indeed, it is Mikel Arteta's understanding that the Premier League's key match incident panel has concluded that certain decisions in the match were serious errors. With time to step back following the match, Mikel Arteta has spoken rationally and reasonably about the comments and fully explained the context in which these should have been considered, as well as underlining his respects for the match officials and for the FA and his desire to follow the applicable rules. Mikel Arteta has also emphasised his ongoing commitment to the improvement of standards with the aim of ensuring that any similar incidents are dealt with as efficiently and accurately as possible. Last bit, and then I'm going to bring in Jean to the conversation, I promise. Let's just go to this comment here. At the hearing before us, Mikel Arteta made it clear that he was not suggesting that when he used the word disgrace in the interviews, he had in fact been intending to use the word disgrazia, or at least to use a word which carried with it the connotations of misfortune, tragedy, or bad luck, rather than connotations of abuse or insult. He explained that he intended to use the English word with his knowledge of the English meaning of that word, and secondly, that any suggestion to the contrary in the letter was the result of miscommunication between him and Arsenal when the letter had been prepared. We accepted that explanation. There was no repetition of that suggestion in his witness statement or in the response of the case summary, and Mikel Arteta was clear in his oral evidence about any erroneous impression given by that paragraph in the letter. Very interesting indeed. I quite like that. Talking about the language and the choice of a Spanish word, I assume. Very, very interesting. We'll talk more about the Mikel Arteta charge in tomorrow morning show. We are going to bring the conversation now back to Ivan Toney with our next caller. Again, I'm hoping I'm doing the pronunciation correctly. Jean, how you doing, mate? You good, you well?
I'm well, thanks. How you doing?
Have I pronounced that right, or have I made myself look like a right mug?
Well, it's supposed to be like Jean, but it doesn't really matter.
Jean, don't apologise for my mistake. It was me. So, Jean, I'm so sorry about that. Tell me what your thoughts are on Toney, mate.
Well, I mean, I think I've been vocal personally against signing someone like Toney. But if I believe, for the exact same reasons you don't want him, I actually think he's a viable option.
Yeah.
I like the idea that he's better than Eddie Nketiah, but not going to surpass Jesus. I think Mikel Arteta seems to constantly try to put players together or have players of the same level in the same position. I think the goalkeeper situation is a clear example of that. I think going after Mudryk while we have Martinelli is a good example of that. recruiting someone like Declan Rice, okay, sure, he does go to another level, but you can't argue that Thomas Partey is still a good player in that position. Right back with Tomiyasu and Ben White, we've got the same sort of thing. And I think when you look at those positions in our team, it's, except for the goalkeeping situation, it's quite stable to have players like that. And then players that will understand that they would need to sit on the bench for periods of time as well. And like someone in the comment section said, Jesus can always move over to the right wing, which does provide some sort of cover for Saka, which we don't seem able to provide at the moment. And we can't find it on the market either. Yeah.
What do you make of the comparison statistically with Nketiah, and with it being quite similar, if not slightly in Nketiah's favour, and why doesn't that put you off the idea of investing a very big amount of money into a player that isn't very much clear of him numerically, at least?
Yeah, I don't think we want to go after. I don't think that's what Mikel wants, really. Players with prolific goal scoring numbers. I don't think that Jesus is that. I don't think his striker targets have been that. Maybe Vlahovic for a period of time, but also if he would have tried to change him into more of a deep lying playmaker anyways, the same way that Jesus is doing. And I think Ivan Toney would bring a very similar type of playing style to that. I think Eddie Nketiah will always be your more prolific striker. But I just don't think that's what Arteta wants. Unless you're the most prolific striker, unless you're a Haaland, prolific alone is not worth it. You need to contribute more to the rest of the team.
What would be the maximum kind of price tag that you'd be willing to pay to get him?
Well, I looked at what was being touted, and I don't think I've said we shouldn't go above 50. So I'm gonna sound like a hypocrite to people that know me, but I think I'd go 80. I'd go 80. I'd go all the way to 80 for Ivan Toney if he really does bring to the team what I think he could, and which is continued competition, being able to alter formations and bringing stability when Jesus inevitably gets injured during the season.
Look, I haven't got an argument against that at all. You know, if the argument is that you want to bring in a striker for the reasons that he's not necessarily prolific, and you get that, and that you want to bring him on because you think you're adding a striker of quality that's bringing in a certain level of goals, and you're willing to spend 80 million, I don't have an argument against that. We just have a different point of view on that. We just disagree in the sense that he's the guy to go for. Does the age not worry you? That being like 28, that's a lot of money to pay for somebody who's you're not going to get that money back, basically.
Yeah, there's no resale value. That's definitely a concern. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But to be honest, if our signings don't work out, we lose that money anyways, right? Pepe should have had some resale value to us, but he just didn't get it to us. Ozil should have been able to get at something, but when signings don't work out, they just seem to be in the end. So I think we shouldn't try to negotiate signings with that value. We should look at younger players, not for their resale value, but the fact that we can increase their value towards our team by much more than we bought them for. They're cheaper than usually.
For sure. Jean, thank you Jean, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Absolutely.
So this type of conversation I like. Obviously, there's a clear point of difference. Me and Jean don't agree on the idea of Toney. But I can't disagree with his reasons for wanting Toney. If the reason for wanting Toney is that you appreciate him for the striker that he is, if you're willing to go to 80 million pounds to bring him in, and that you think that when Jesus isn't available, he brings in competent competition, I haven't got too much against that. In my mind, the issue that I do have, obviously, is where I disagree, and what I would argue the other direction is that, and as Jean, of course, admitted himself, is that at 28, that's a lot of money to invest, 80 million pounds in a 28-year-old. And again, I would point to the numbers and say, is it really worth going to 80 million when Nketiah is bringing as many goals when you look at the XG and his finishing and situations like that? I've also noticed that some people often use the argument of, well, he's playing at Brentford now, so if he was to move to Arsenal, surely we'd see more. We'd see him score more goals. And to a degree, I get that. I get the idea of that. But it's also worth remembering that Arsenal play against teams that play differently when they play against Arsenal compared to when they play against Brentford. When teams play against Brentford, they're not going into those games with low blocks. So Toney's got more space to work in. He's got more chances to operate. And when, Arsenal play, they tend to go against more teams that do play with those low blocks. So would he be able to cope with that change of environment? It's an entire change of environment, not just a change of system. Let's bring Raf into the conversation. It's been a little while since he's been on the channel. Always a pleasure to speak with you, my friend. How are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Very
Can you
good.
hear me?
I know you've read my article because you laughed hysterically at it in our WhatsApp group. So tell me your thoughts.
I wasn't. Do you know what? Funny enough, I actually I haven't read it yet, but I laughed because I
So
just knew.
typical. Like,
Do you know what it was?
honestly, that
I
tweet I
laughed.
put out, I'd say 95% of the people that have left a comment or quote tweet to that article haven't even read the article.
No, I'm gonna read. I'm gonna read it, but the reason why I laughed was because I just thought I kind of know what you. I was like, I had an idea of what you were gonna say. Like, obviously,
Yeah.
we've spoken about it before, and I've listened to a lot of obviously, I listen almost all the time, so I kind of know your thoughts on it. So when I saw it, it just made me laugh. But yeah, I'm gonna read it for
sure. Where are you then with Toney?
So,
Where's your head at?
So I'm a bit mixed. So I'm not as adamant that he's not right as you are, but I understand. I'm not like he's the answer. I think so. I would say the cons. There's obvious cons. He's 20. He's 27, 28. That kind of age bracket. There's definitely no resale value, really. He's he's not played Premier League football for that long. He's not like a statesman that's been in the Premier League for 10 years
like
and
2 seasons, isn't it? I think.
2 seasons pretty much, and obviously it's been hampered. I know one of the bugbears for you was also some of the antics, and that you also got to bear
I'm looking at it more from a footballing point of view. To be honest.
yeah, but I think you've everything's got to be added. Like,
Sure.
I don't even put as much in his ban, which is you've got to factor it in, but I would factor more in the fact that he's not going to be coming in with complete match practice. So buying him in January, he hasn't played for months. So we don't know what Toney we're even going to get. We may not get the same Toney that left. We just don't know that yet. And also, you look at the whole, Brentford's all right, the couple of comments in that sense. And if he's not playing or he's not starting, how's he going to react? I'm just talking about the cons in that sense. So all of those things, like we've done well to cultivate a good dynamic in the club, like from the players, like even with the Ramsdale situation, apart from his dad, you're not really hearing like a lot of like disgruntled players coming out criticizing the manager or anything like that. It overall looks like a good cohesive atmosphere, and someone like that potentially could upset the apple cart. And I just think in terms of even just ability wise, there's an argument he's not stylistically the striker that has got the best out of the way we play. Like Jesus at the moment, for all of his faults, when Jesus plays, we look a lot more likely to score. Even in the Villa game, the Lons, you look at PSV, you look at some of the games that Jesus has played. I would say that Saka's continued to create. Martinelli's look more likely to create chances. Erdegaard's potentially improved. Havertz has definitely improved since Jesus has played. So who's to say that we actually don't need a striker that emulates some of the characteristics that Jesus has, rather than a different type of striker, which Toney is. And there's just, and again, obviously, he's got a lot of penalties. His non-penalty goals isn't like through the roof. So I would say they're the cons. I would say the pros are he's Prem ready. He would look at Arsenal as a definite step up. He's an upgrade on Eddie, in my opinion, just in terms of his gameplay, his hold up play, the way that he brings players into play, his strength, the ability to head the ball in low blocks. We've seen that Havertz has had joy when we've played against low blocks, hitting the far post or getting onto crosses. So that could be a positive. And also just the fact that, a different option up front is a good thing for us. I think that we could have someone that is more clinical than Eddie, because for all Eddie's, he comes across as a poacher, and he has got some decent finishes. He has also had some glaring misses at key moments as well, and also shown that his hold-up play in some of the key games and some of the key moments hasn't been enough to bring people into play and allow us to play the football that we play when Jesus is playing. So I think this argument's almost it's mixed for me in the sense is Toney the right one or is Eddie kind of the wrong one? Is he wrong enough that we go for someone like Toney and just take the gamble, or is Eddie good enough that we wait to find someone that maybe ticks more of our boxes? So that's why I say I've got mixed feeling. I think the price is important for me. I think if we can structure a deal, like obviously they was talking about a 50 million loan, like a loan with 50 million obligation. I can't really see that happening personally, just because of the market in the Premier League. He's a proven goal scorer, so I don't see why they would let him go for 50 million personally. He's not, from what I understand, I don't think he's not got a year left or anything on his contract. So I think he's got 2 or 3 years, or maybe 2.5 from now. So I don't see why they would do that, if I'm honest. So I think then you're looking into the 60, the 70s, maybe even an 80 mil, especially if there's competition. I wouldn't buy him for 80 mil personally. No way. Just because of the money, the price, the expectation. I just personally wouldn't do it. But if you can get a good deal, anything 60 below that is, and maybe you can structure it right, maybe you can add Eddie in the deal to make it less, then I wouldn't be against it. I think someone raised a decent point, a good point. We don't necessarily need to have someone that's better than Jesus. What I think Liverpool and City have done, they have 6 competent attacking options. I think that now we can all probably agree that the drop-off, I'd say we've got 4, and I would say the drop-off at the moment with Eddie and Reece from Saka, Martinelli, Jesus, Trossard consistently is probably just a little bit shy of what we need if we're going to continually compete at the top and win these trophies. I think we need to upgrade those 2 positions personally. I think a winger is just important as a forward, if I'm on it, as a striker.
It's more important.
Yeah, me too.
I think like a Martinelli Mark is
100%
so needed.
Yeah, and I feel
No, go on.
No, I was going to say, and I feel for Reece in the sense that I feel like he hasn't really been given.
He's just not
as much opportunity, but I just don't know if he's at the level
where he's just never going to be that guy.
What we need, and it's kind of like, if that's the case, let's just get players that are going to be good enough. Let's get a Pedro Neto, a Bakayoko, a someone that is
Bakayoko
good.
is now like, everyone's like, oh,
no, you know what? I'll be so honest, and I probably said it in the group chat as well. When he played against, I've been watching PSV a little bit from the summer, and he played against Rangers, I think, they were unreal. Him and Noah Lang. And I was thinking even the PSV game would be harder than it was at the Emirates, because he was so good. And I just think he's a very good player. But there's others that we could get. I think it's more about we need another winger with pace, because Trossard he's kind of a 10 masquerading as a winger, just based on like positionally he can do so many things. But we lose pace when Martinelli doesn't play. So I think we need another winger that gives us that, basically. So and I just think Reece, unfortunately, we can get some money back for him now because he's not on a free. We've signed him to a decent contract, but we need to probably move on from Reece and Eddie, if I'm honest, to get to where we want to get to.
If we can get 50 million for both of them, I think we've done really well. I think we've done really, really well.
I think we can.
And, it might not be impossible to see that. I think it might be closer to 40 for the pair of them rather than 50. But if you can get 50, that'd be amazing. Eddie Nketiah is an England international now. He started loads of games for Arsenal. He scored in the Champions League. He's on a long contract. He's 24. Any team coming in should be looking to pay upwards of £25 million easily, in my opinion, for Nketiah now. Nelson, I think we should be expecting more than £15 million if you want to buy him. So maybe closer to £20 million. I think when people look at the Jordan Ives of this world and say, like, he cost 60 million or whatever, and I don't usually buy into that argument all that much. But in the case of Nelson, I do think that, you're looking at someone that you should be looking to try and get that around that. So, 40 to £50 million for those two would be great.
I think what you got to look at as well is, I think perception is quite important. And I think Arsenal are starting to change the perception of, for one, their young players, and for two, just the quality of Arsenal in general. Whereas, so now I don't think players are going to be leaving Arsenal all the time, and it's just like, we just need to get rid of them because nobody wants them. I think you're looking at two young English players who will probably attract like decent interest. I think Eddie, you could easily look at Eddie and say you could potentially get a 30 million for Eddie, 35 if the perception's right. He's played enough games now. He's scored enough goals in the Premier League to say that he could score at this level. And if we're not like in a rush to sell him, then you might be able to kind of get a decent deal. You look at Palace, Fulham, you look at like Brentford. I think one of those clubs could be in for him. And then Reece is similar. Like you get 15, 20 million, I think you take it.
The thing
and
is,
then
like,
it allows us to get more.
If Brentford lose Toney to say a Chelsea or someone like that, you know, and they wanted to buy Nketiah, I can't say that. If they lose him, I've said this before. I think Nketiah scores 14 non-penalty goals for Brentford in a Premier League season. I really think he could, because he's the centre of that team. He starts every single game. He gets chances in that Brentford team. He's not going up against low blocks like he is for Arsenal week in, week out when we play. I think he can score plenty of goals for Brentford. So, and Buemo's already on 7. You know, at this point,
and you look at like Wisa, like he's got good attributes, but he's not a great player. So if you put Eddie in that position, he'd do alright. I think that's another thing that you could say with Toney though. Like if you put Toney in Arsenal's team with the quality around, if he does get opportunities, I would say he's probably more likely to finish than he would at Brentford. He probably likely to get more chances at Arsenal than Brentford. You got to factor that in as well.
If Eddie played a 38-game season for Arsenal, started every game, how many Premier League goals do you think he'd score? He's got 5 so far. He started 9 games.
I think he'd score about 17, 18. Personally, because I think
17, 18 Premier League goals for Arsenal.
I think if he played 38 games, every game, started every game, I think he scored about 17 goals. The issue that Eddie would have, or the issue that we would have, is I think the team as a whole would suffer. Like, I don't think
Martinelli and Odegaard
they won't score, and I think that's the main for me. That's my main problem with Eddie. I don't feel that Eddie allows some of the other players to be better. I feel like Martinelli struggles when Eddie plays, and I think that's one of the main reasons that's contributed to Martinelli's goal return and goal assist return in this season. I think that we haven't had that many games. If you think about the games Jesus has actually played through the middle, it hasn't been that much. I think it's been about it's probably been about 5, like in the Premier League. If that, I think he played. It hasn't been that much anyway, and I think that's contributed. And I think Saka's going to do it anyway. Odegaard similar. I think all of these players feed off of a striker that actually gets involved in play. So when Trossard plays through the middle, obviously when Jesus plays through the middle, you see an improvement in the way that all of them play because it's not as static. Eddie's very selfish. Even like he'll turn and shoot at any moment, which is a striker. I get it, but they'll struggle from that. So he may score 17, but I think the others will struggle.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think I'd probably say for betting around probably 15, 16 goals, in a Premier League season. But if I asked you how many you think Toney would score, how many do you think Toney would score for us? Premier League goals. Bearing in mind, he got 14 last season for non-penalty goals, by the way. So this doesn't include penalties.
I think he'd get over 20.
You think he'd get more than 20 Premier League goals?
If he played 38 games, because I think he'd take penalties as well. I think
with penalties more than 20.
With penalties more than 20. Without penalties I think it would be between 18 and 22. But I think that the team would still be able to play, will be able to feed off him better. So I think that Saka, Martinelli, and Odegaard would still potentially be able to put up more numbers. Because I think overall he's a better player. I think his hold-up play is better. I think he's good. He's a good passer, but better passer than ball than you would think, kind of looking at him. Sure. And I think the team in general can feed off of him because he's a presence. So that's where I think the improvement is between him and Eddie. I think the big question is, do we wait and get another player who gives us more of everything and is still like a kind of an upgrade in quality? I think there's other strikers potentially that you maybe less and give you similar output as Toney, or maybe as much but are better players, if that makes sense. So it just really depends on who we can get. You look at some of the, there's quite a few we were talking about it the other day. There's, you look at the Openda, Wahi, Garissa, Jimenez. There's a lot of like young kind of up and coming striker, Boniface, that's starting to come up at the moment that could give you a different, like a whole different element up front. Letaro is probably gone now, but look at it. Like a year ago, everyone was saying that he could get him, but after the World Cup, it was like, does he look that good? If you look at him now for Inter, he can't stop scoring. So, there'll always be kind of other options potentially. It's just that I don't think Toney is necessarily a bad option. It's just,
for what he'd cost, I just don't think he'd be worth the investment.
And I get that. I do get that as well. I think the cost for me is the big thing. It's just, can we get him at a subsidized cost? Can we add Eddie into the cost that makes it not as much? It's all those things.
If you told me it was 30 to 40 million pounds and Eddie and Nketiah, I'd be more open to it.
Yeah,
I'd be more open. I'd be more open to it. Yeah. I wouldn't say like categorically no, because as you say, like, because then you're not necessarily, because obviously there's no guarantee you're going to get a buyer for Nketiah at that fee anyway. We struggled to get what people wanted for Balogun. We got 35 million euros plus add-ons or whatever it was, for him. And I don't want to go down that because I know me and you went back and forth all summer about Balogun.
But, I was going to say, can of worms there. But I think the difference with Balogun and Eddie though would be that I think Eddie's done a lot more in the Prem, and the eyes are a bit more on Eddie in terms of what he's done in the Prem, England International. I actually think that it might be easier to get a decent fee for Eddie than it would be for Balogun, even though Balogun done well because he was in France. I think that helps. But go on, sorry, I cut you.
No. I just think that again, the price tag is the biggest thing for me, and the idea also that there could be young strikers out there that could grow into a much better player than Toney for what I think he'd give us. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. But Raf, it's been a pleasure to chat to you, mate, as always is. Thanks, mate. I'll catch you soon.
Cheers,
good luck with the daddy duties. See you later. See you in a bit.
Mate. Bye.
No worries. Massive appreciate that for Raf for coming on. I'm hoping that we can get Rob into the conversation, although we're going to check the audio issues. Rob, how you doing?
Kia ora. I'm having a bit of an issue with the audio. It's looping, but hopefully I can.
It's not looping on my end, but is it?
Okay,
so
cool.
It must be looping on your end. Okay.
I think it's looping on mine. I'll try and filter out the loop.
Tell me what you're thinking with Toney, mate.
Yeah, so I just find it bizarre with Toney that we're talking about, potentially 80 million with similar stats to Nketiah, and yet, you're talking about maybe getting 25 to 30 mil for Nketiah, and yet he's younger. It seems. I mean, the market in football is crazy anyway, right? The amounts of money that have been backed around when there's kind of cost of living issues.
Yeah, I know.
Completely bizarre.
Football's a different planet,
we've got to kind of park that, right? Because that's just the reality of what the market is. But I find it completely bizarre that we look. First of all, I think buying a 28-year-old is not a great idea. We're already dealing with financial fair play, and you've spoken many times about how trying to get a striker or pay 50 million plus in January for any player is unrealistic. So the concept of trying to somehow scrape together the money by potentially selling Nketiah or Reece Nelson or maybe Ramsdale to try and sort of stump up this money, and potentially 3 players to stump up the money, young players that have got or should have amazing market value. And that's the other thing, right? Like Arsenal don't seem to be able to sell players at decent value compared to other clubs. As I already said, Nketiah for 30, whereas Ivan Toney potentially 80. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems messed up. I don't think it makes any sense to try and fork out all of this money, potentially sell 3 of our good players for someone that's got stats that is similar to what we've already got. That doesn't make sense to me.
No, I think you're absolutely spot on to ask the question about the money. The money is the biggest thing, as I was saying to Raf. The biggest blockade for me is the idea of forking out that much money for a player who, in my opinion, doesn't start for Arsenal. In our best team, Toney isn't in it for me. So to fork out 80 million is a lot. Why do you think? I'll ask the question because you're clearly on the same side of this as me. Why do you think that other people are very, very keen on Toney?
Desperation.
Really?
I think it is obvious that we need. Well, I don't know about obvious, but I think that Arsenal supporters have been crying out for a 20+ goal scorer for seasons already. And I think when we look at, I mean, I know he's an anomaly, but like when we look at Haaland and what he's managed to do for Man City, who are already a good side, I think it makes sense that Arsenal supporters want someone to knock in 20+ goals a season. But I also think, I mean, I think this season's different. Last season, I think we lost it with our defence, not necessarily our striking. But I think this season, obviously the quality of the defence, how tight we are at the back, how we're controlling games. Arteta's done a masterful job at kind of getting hold of what that issue was last season. And this season we're just, well, we weren't last season either, but we're not clinical in front of goal. So I think it's obvious why Arsenal supporters are desperate for a 20+ striker. But with desperation comes unrealistic goal. Well, maybe not unrealistic goals, but like unrealistic expectation of what we might be willing to pay for that. So again, it comes back to this. I just don't think Toney is anything near that kind of value. Like if we could get a striker for say 30 million, who we thought could bring us those 10 goals in the second half of the season to get it, to get us over the line, sure, no problem. But paying twice, 3 times as much as that to then give us the FFP issues, for a goal scorer that's got similar, as we've already said, similar stats to NK, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
and maybe just before you kick me off, I've been back for a while. It's 5:30 in the morning here in New Zealand, so I know I don't have a key accent, but I'm a 40 years Arsenal fan. I grew up just north of London and Highbury when I was kind of quite young. But yeah, it's beautiful times at the moment for Arsenal. But yeah, just get into the breaking news that you talked about. Absolutely flabbergasted that
it's been clear,
slightly heartened that that the independent review body has not charged him. Like I thought it was an absolute definite he was going to get.
So did I. Yeah, I'll be very honest. I did as well. I was certainly going to get charged. Yeah.
So yeah, I find it quite heartening, but I also find it completely bizarre of how they've worded it. They've basically kind of given him a let off because of the circumstances.
Yeah. And because of the language as well, which is really strange as well. But yeah, as I say, I'm going to talk about that at great length tomorrow on the 8 a.m. show. So I'm sure we'll be on that. But yeah, I agree with you. I was sure he was going to get charged. I'm also very happy that he hasn't, because I was worried that the incident in Turkey, as we talked about this morning with Peter Walton's comments, that was going to get conflated and they were going to throw the book at Arteta a bit to make a bit of a statement. And I'm glad that that's not happened. And so you've got to hold your hands up and say fair play, to the FA at least for not doing that. But Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure to put a face to the name, first of all, and to have you on the show. Really appreciate it.
Nice one. Yeah, thanks for all the great content.
Thanks, mate.
Well,
Very
yes.
kind. Stay well. Speak to you soon. Much appreciate Rob for coming on. Fantastic. Rob's one of our long-term listeners to the chat, always popping up in our chat books and putting in some very good comments. So it's always nice to get a debut on our phone-ins. Let's bring in our next caller to the show. We've got Oleg Benga joining us now. How you doing, mate? You good, you well?
Yes, Tom, how are you?
Very good. Did I pronounce that correctly? I'm learning
Yes.
name pronunciations today. Tell me if I've messed that one up.
Yes, you did. You got it right.
Perfect. Tell me where your head's at with Ivan Toney. You've been listening to some of our callers speak about their various views on him. Where are you sitting with this one?
Yeah, I actually think the idea of Tony is going to be something that's worthwhile for Arsenal. One thing I'd like the listeners to know is that you can't really always go by the price that you hear in the media. For
Sure.
me, 80 mil would be too much for Tony. But we need to remember the deal with Raya. Initially, we were hearing Raya, going to go for 40 something million. You understand what I'm saying? At the end of the day, Arsenal got him for 27. And we even
We got
got
him
him
on
on a
loan.
loan. Come again?
Yeah. We got him on loan. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
with the option. Yeah.
we got him on loan with an option. So I want to believe that us signing Tony, there is no way Edu or Arteta will pay 80 million for Tony. I don't see that happening. It's got to be something worthwhile before they, you know what I'm saying, before they buy him. And then I hear people say, okay, Tony does not suit our style, is not the kind of profile we want. What we need right now is a different profile of striker. We have Jesus, we have Trossard, whose style are similar, right?
Sure.
We need someone that will get at the end of these crosses. And that's what we don't have right now.
What do we think about
Tony,
Havertz being that guy?
well, Harvard is that guy, not entirely for me. You understand? Harvard has been impressing me lately, and I'm so happy that he's kind of becoming the player that we all thought we were signing when he first came to Arsenal. But looking for an out-and-out striker who would finish your chances. Everybody say we don't finish our dinner, right? That's what we need, and that's what Tony is going to give us. Harvard, sometimes we've seen him miss chances against Manchester City in the Community Shield. Two clear chances, he missed them. I don't think Tony missed those chances. If we have Tony at the end of those balls, one of them will be at the back of the net. I want to
Sure.
believe.
But he has a
And
lower goal per shot percentage than Nketiah.
well, we cannot compare what you're getting from Tony at Brentford with what you're gonna get from Tony at Arsenal. You
So
understand?
how do we make a because you're not the only person who says that, and a lot of people say, you can't judge a player based on where they are because they could do something differently. But if we're applying that, how do you judge any player? Do you know what I mean? Because it's kind of a bit like if I can't judge a player based on what they're doing here and apply that to
Yes.
Arsenal, how can I make a judgment about any player and then how they might go on at Arsenal? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. The way I would judge it is that look at the style that Brentford plays, right? They are not an all out and out attacking team like Arsenal, right? And for me, if Tony can still put up decent numbers at Brentford, right, he will put up better numbers at Arsenal, where the style is all out, attack. You understand what I'm saying? Imagine what Bukayo Saka and Martinelli, will do if they have Tony in front of them to feed. Imagine what Tony will be getting from Odegaard. You understand? Imagine if Thomas Partey comes in with those, near accurate long balls and the kind of balls that Raya puts up from the box, from the 18-yard box. These are, the dimension of the game that you don't too much see when you watch Brentford. And that's what Tony will have to feed on when it comes to Arsenal. Definitely his numbers will go up. And the guy has Premiership experience. Whether we like it or not, people view Arsenal better than we view ourselves. They see us as a threat right now. We are in the Champions League. We are beating teams. We are second from in the EPL, despite all these ref decisions that's been going against us. They see us as a threat. So if we get that striker that will finish our dinner, like everybody says, I mean, imagine where we're gonna be.
I think it's a fair argument when people say about it. The only counter I usually bring up is that you're right to say that when they're playing in an Arsenal team that's more attacking with more talent surrounding them as well than they have at Brentford. What I would say is obviously the games that Arsenal play are different to the games that Brentford play. And what I mean by that is that when a team plays Brentford, they're not going to sit back in a low block. When they play against Arsenal, they do sit back. A lot of teams, not all of them, but some of them do sit back in a low block. So is there an argument there that maybe the argument that he has better players and he's in a better team is somewhat cancelled out by the fact that he's not given as much space when he's playing for Brentford?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's not cancelled out. And the reason why I said that is that we have players who can open up the defense, right? Look at the way we play. Our wingers are pretty much almost, hogging the touchline. People don't realize it, but when you're playing a team with low blocks and you have wingers who are spread wide, number one, you can't leave them with the ball and not go to tackle them, right? And the moment someone goes to tackle them, what are you doing? You are leaving a gap. You know what I'm saying? So Toney, I mean, training with the team, knowing the dynamics of play, he will figure out where he gonna get his meal at. You know what I'm saying? When he sees the movement of the other players, he's gonna figure it out. Even though we play low block teams, right? People have to realize we still create a lot of chances against these low block teams. We just don't finish them off. We do. We create a lot of chances. Look at the last game we played against this Luton Town. Yeah.
Oh, Luton, sure. Yeah.
Big, tall defenders. We scored 4 goals against Luton. How many goals did Man City score against them? 2. How many goals did Liverpool score? 1. Yeah, we create chances against this team. We just don't finish our dinner. And that's what Toney is going to bring to us.
Fair enough. You've got more faith than I do. I need to see a little bit more from Toney, but I respect it. Oleg Benega, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Tom. I have to tell you, I'm calling from Atlanta, Georgia. I wake up 3 in the morning to watch your show every day, Tom.
Why?
Keep up the good work.
You're mad. You're mad, mate.
I do. I really like your show.
Thanks, man. That's really good. Just know that you can watch it on catch up. So I know that you love being in the chat box, but just just get some sleep, man.
The live experience is better.
Fair enough, man. I appreciate it. Absolute pleasure.
Nice speaking with you.
Bye-bye. Brilliant. Love it. Let's bring our next call. We've got Marcus, and then we've got SF coming back as well. Marcus, how you doing, mate? You good, Joel?
Yeah, I'm good, Tom. How are you?
Not bad. Where are you joining me from, mate?
I'm in London, not too far.
I could sense the accent. So yeah, fair enough.
Listen, I have to agree with the last caller, Tom. I think he's spot on. But what I want to know from you is, what do you need to see from Toney to change your mind? Because I tune into your lives, and I know people say you've got an agenda, and I don't think it's that, but you are slightly negative against Toney as opposed to anyone else that we're rumored with. So what do you want to see from him?
I think I want to see him be more ruthless, actually, than he is. And I want to see that reflected in the numbers, so that when when I'm looking through the numbers that I get on offer, that it's not even debatable, if you know what I mean.
Before you continue, though, you would admit that Arsenal are more ruthless than Brentford.
I would, but I do think there's a good argument to suggest that we play different games to what Brentford play. So when Brentford play, Toney's got a lot more space to operate in. He's got a lot more the ability to counter, because they're not going up against low blocks anywhere near as much as we do. So when he comes to Arsenal, it's a different game that he's technically playing.
So do you think he lacks the ability to adapt and be flexible to how we play?
That's the thing, is there's a lot of unknowns, isn't there? Because it's not me saying he doesn't have that. It's that I've not seen enough to tell me that he has that. And also, secondly, what I would say is that the other reasons, it's not more so about him as a footballer as much as it is the actual wider profile. So 28 years of age, the price that's involved in this deal, when there's arguably options that we could get for maybe slightly less or the same amount of money that are going to be a better
unproven talent in the Premier League, isn't it?
He's only had 1 good season in the Premier League, though.
I would say he's had 2.
Well, how many goals did he score in the first one?
I didn't come with stats, so he
had 7 non-penalty goals in his first Premier League season, which is
Brentford's first Premier League season. So they don't have the creative.
They were good.
They showed us how good they were on the first day. I remember.
Yeah. So, but this is what I'm saying. Like the whole Premier League proven thing, I do think it gets thrown around. Just if you've played in the Premier League, you're Premier League proven. And I just think that he's had one good, really good season, which was last season, where he got 14 non-penalty goals, 6 penalties on top of that as well. And the season before that, it wasn't as convincing as I think
guess
maybe
to
people
me,
think.
Toney passes the eye test, and us
Sure.
as Arsenal fans, we know
You know how I
we
feel
need
about that,
something.
though.
Well, we need something that's different, right? We play with a lot of short guys, good on the ball. I know you said we've got Kai Havertz, but we know Kai Havertz. We've seen Kai Havertz for a few years now. Okay, so I just think there's no harm as long as you don't break the bank, keep it around the 60, 70 million mark.
Yeah,
there's no harm in bringing Toney and having that option.
I completely think that's fair. The 70 million is a lot, though, for a 28-year-old.
Not in this day and age. Not when everyone costs 100 million minimum.
Right, but it is in the context if it stops us from doing other business, though. So if
in the context of winning the league,
well, I'd argue that I'd rather go into so this season and last season. Last season, the biggest reason why we didn't win the league was what? Would you say? Saliba's injury. I agree with you.
Yeah, okay.
This season, I think one of the biggest threats to us not winning the league this season is either not having enough in my opinion, the wide areas. Because I think centre forward wise, we've got Jesus, we've got Trossard, Havertz can play there as well.
We don't have Trossard. Trossard is not a centre forward.
I think he is more than a wide
Trossard.
player, right?
Not when we have the option to buy a centre forward. And you want to sort of adapt a wide player into a centre forward. And we've tried that with Trossard. We've tried that with Martinelli, and it's not worked. Not how we want it to work. So I feel like we do need an out-and-out striker. Just a bit soft.
Go on.
Well, we want results, right? We saw it. It didn't bring the results.
Trossard's record when he starts a centre forward, we win nearly all of those games. Do you remember when he was playing that centre forward role? We won every game. We took him out and then we lost. We didn't win 3 in a row. And then we put him back in and we won again. Do you remember that?
I can't recall that now. You'd have to.
So at the end of last season, when Nketiah was playing, when Jesus was out with his knee injury, was it a knee injury for Jesus? I think it might have been. Yeah, it was. The World Cup injury. Nketiah started those games. Trossard came in. We won. Jesus came back in the game against Fulham.
But that was with Eddie leading the line, mainly. In Jesus' absence after the World Cup.
I rate
Trossard. I rate Trossard on the left as a backup to Martinelli or a replacement at times, but not down the middle. I just don't think that's the answer for us. Neither is Kai Havertz in the middle.
I think Kai Havertz offers us something different, though, that fans are calling for. And I don't think it's worth spending 70 million on Toney to have something different when we've already got that in Havertz, personally.
But no matter which way we go, we are going to have to get a striker, whether it's January or in the summer, and it's going to cost us a minimum of 70 million.
Sure, but if we're going to spend 70 million on a striker, I'd rather or more than that, I'd rather spend that money on someone where it's not even a debate about who starts. Do you know what I mean? Like, if we spend a huge amount of money, I don't want to be sitting there going, "Well, does he start over Jesus this week?" I want to be going, "He starts."
But it's an option. It's an option, and Jesus, we know, is not always available.
Sure.
So sometimes it won't be an option and it will be a guarantee. And right now, our guarantee is Eddie Nketiah or Trossard. And that's not going to win us what we want.
Well, we agreed that last season, the biggest reason why we didn't win things was because Saliba's injury.
The biggest reason, not the only reason. It was the biggest reason, but it wasn't the only reason.
Do you think if Saliba stayed fit, we win the league?
We would have stood a better chance.
Do you think we would have won it? I'm going to push you.
Likely.
So, and that means that there is a scenario where we're likely to win the league with Jesus, Nketiah, and Trossard.
That was last season. This is another season. We've got Liverpool this season.
Yeah.
You know, there's other competitors that weren't competing last season. So it's a different story. We can't say, oh, you know, last season if we did this, it's a different story.
I don't think a striker will happen in January for the record. Like I don't think Arsenal have the financial capacity to go out and spend that amount of money in January on that position. I think if we sign a striker, it will be next summer. And I think that, in all honesty, I think there is a big threat again of the lack of numbers that we've got in defence. You know, Tomiyasu now out, Timber's out for the long term. We're really weak there. I think we need to make sure we bring another defender in, and I think we need another centre midfielder, like a box-to-box centre midfielder. I think we need.
And I'm not going to argue that. I agree.
Yeah,
but I think we need a striker as well, right? You know.
Yeah, I think me and you align on a lot of things. It's just, for me, the Toney thing is, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but like, if I spend that amount of money, I want guarantees that that guy is going to come in and be our starter. And I just don't think he starts over Jesus for me, you know.
But who does?
Well, that's the fair question. And I think if you can't find somebody that you see as an immediate starter over Jesus, then the next best thing is to sign a younger player who you think has the ceiling that goes above that and that can also produce.
We could have spoken about keeping Balogun and people like that.
Yeah,
Jesus can start. Jesus can fill in for Saka. He's proven he can play in other areas on the pitch.
Sure.
So by buying a striker doesn't necessarily say Jesus doesn't get a starting berth.
Yeah, I understand that. But what I'm saying is that if you can't buy a striker that is categorically better than Jesus now, then go out and sign a player that can produce both now and reach an even higher level than Toney. That's what I'm saying. So, like, you've got Boniface in Leverkusen scoring loads of goals, like hats full of goals. You've got Jimenez in Feyenoord scoring a ridiculous number of goals. It
doesn't always translate to the Premier League, and we've seen that. That's why getting someone that's, and I say it again, Premier League proven. Yeah. I know he's 28, but it brings maturity to the team. He knows what he's doing. It could just be hit the ground running.
Yeah.
And that's
I just think me and you have got different views of what Premier League proven. For me, he's not Premier League proven enough to say, because you have to transition to Arsenal as well. It's not just, staying in the same league doesn't necessarily mean you're going to succeed. We've seen that with loads of players. But like you look at Lukaku going from Everton to Manchester United.
You just have to sometimes have faith that it will work out. It's not a guarantee, never.
Yeah, and trust me, if Toney signs, I'm the first one on the team saying I'm hoping he proves me wrong. That's the thing. I'm not going to be sitting here saying I'm not going to celebrate when he scores. I'm not going to.
No, you're not that character. So that's.
No,
that's
I want
else.
the guy to succeed. I want him to prove me wrong. And it's not even a case of proving me wrong. I've said time and time again, I think Toney's a good striker. So, I think Jesus is bordering on a world-class centre forward.
I think you've kind of put your name on the line there. Yeah,
I think I have, but because I'm not in the category of like it being just a no-brainer to sign him, I think that naturally makes people think that I don't want him over like loads of players. When it's not true. Like I realistically, in terms of players that are in their prime, Toney is amongst those that are, in the upper levels. As I said, it's a debate about who starts between him and Jesus if he comes in, which means you must be signing a bloody good striker because Jesus is a bloody good striker.
He's a good player. He's a good player. He's not a top striker, and that's what we need.
It depends on your definition, I guess. Like for Arteta, he's a top striker because he does the role of what he wants from his striker. Do you know what I mean?
For me, it's finishing. And that's just where Jesus lacks it. That's what we want to see more, more clinical finishing in front of goal. And Jesus just doesn't have that. He's a great player, one of my favorite, but he's just not a great finisher.
Last season, when Toney got his goals, he averaged, I think it was 0.55 non-penalty goals and assists per game. So you're looking at a goal or an assist every other game.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Jesus was 0.7.
But he couldn't finish. He couldn't convert those.
But he gives you more goals. He gives the team more goals.
No, he gives them more expected goals because he's a better footballer. But he can't convert them. And that's my argument. He's finishing. Not his expected finishing.
I think he gets treated too harshly with his finishing because it's not a case of he can't convert them because he does. He scores plenty of goals. He doesn't score as many as we would like, but he scores plenty. So he can. He's got the capabilities of scoring fantastic. You think about the goal he scored at against Leicester last season. You think about the goal that he scored in PSV earlier this season.
He's a great player. He's one of my favorite. I'll say it again. I had nothing against Jesus in this debate, but we need more options, and Toney brings something different.
Fair enough. I completely respect that, Marcus. I can't disagree with you. I think he does bring something different. It's just my question mark about whether or not it's worth it or if there is a better option. And I just think there might be better options. But I completely respect that.
Then that's great. But as of now, I think 70 million is worth it.
Fair enough. Marcus, I think we can leave as friends. I appreciate your time.
Time has been great debate.
Absolutely. Really appreciate your time, mate. I'll speak to you soon. Fantastic stuff. They're the types of calls that I really live for, where you can have a genuine debate, a genuine discussion with two people of two different points of views and and it goes through. You don't even have to agree at the end, and you can still leave us friends. Fantastic. Thank you, Marcus, again for coming on, and thank you to all of our callers for coming on. It is an absolute pleasure to be able to do this show and to be able to be joined by so many different and open-minded people that have their different views that we discuss. And I hope I put it across in the right way, and I hope I've hosted it the right way. I'm going to edit out that first minute and a half where my voice turned into a Dalek, so just be prepared for that to disappear. But other than that, it's great. Absolute pleasure to speak to all of our listeners today. I'm going to end the show there. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in and watched, and will be watching and listening on playback as well. Your time is very much appreciated. And yeah, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll be back tomorrow morning, where, of course, I'll be talking a lot more about Mikel Arteta's avoidance of an FA charge. Breaking news throughout this show. We didn't get to touch upon it as much as I would have liked to, because I wanted to stick to the topic of Toney. But yeah, huge news today. The FA have decided that Arteta's charge was not proven, that the alleged breach was not proven, and so he will indeed very much not be facing any kind of ban off the back of that. So very, very, very interesting indeed. Thanks, guys, for listening. Really appreciate your time. Drop a like, subscribe, and yeah, I will speak to you tomorrow morning, bright and early, 8 a.m. Or in the case of our fantastic listeners earlier, Ogbinga, 3 a.m. if you're based in Atlanta. Really appreciate your time, guys. See you soon. Have a fantastic evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you happen to be in the world. And as always, up the Arsenal.